Here.
Ms. Howe? Here. Ms. McDermott?
You have the
Here.
recording on?
Mr. Perry?
Here.
You have the recording
Ms.
on?
Radel?
Just trying to mute it.
Here.
It's recording.
Recording in progress.
Mr. Schnee?
Present.
Mr. Urban?
Here.
Mr. Vogt?
He might sign off. He's recovering.
Excuse me, Mr. McGinley, this is Morrow.
Yeah.
We had a disconnection on the system right after the voting session.
I know that.
Not everyone has reconnected yet.
We still have the meeting starts at 8 o'clock. Mr. Morrow.
That's fine. I'm just letting you know the status.
Thank you.
Mr. Vogt is absent, and Mr. McGinley.
Present.
10 present.
Okay. Additions, deletions from the work session agenda. Motion to adopt the agenda.
Motion.
Second. Ms. Saban, Mr. Perry, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any in opposition, any abstentions? None heard, motion carries. Mr. Swets.
Thank you, Mr. McGinley. So in your packet is the budget report for the previous months, which would be August. I'm just going to give some brief information. I'm not connected to New World right now, so anything I can't answer, if somebody can send me an email, we'll gladly get back on the 2-week period. But I do have the PDF. I'm just not able to connect to New World. So real estate taxes, we've talked about this before, that, our two biggest drivers are the real estate taxes and obviously from the tax sales. Real estate taxes at 96% of budget. As we've also said in prior meetings, we budget 92%. So we're at 96% of the 92% that we budget. And for the real estate sales, we're at 85%. I think everybody knows last year with those being pushed off, we didn't come anywhere near that number. A lot of the expenses are in the ballpark of 60 to 65%. But if there is an individual question that I can't answer, I'll gladly take an email. That's all I have.
Any questions for Mr. Swets?
I just have a comment. Accounts payable, you only have one accounts payable. That's excellent, Mr. Swets.
Yeah, I did go through that. I know we had talked, sometimes we have 5 or 6, but I know we really made a concerted effort not to have pages and pages of accounts payable in the over 30 or as in the past, the 45-day bucket. So as we get requests in from the various departments, we really look to clean them up and turn them around as quickly as possible.
Mr. McGinley, if I could.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Swets, I have a question on the reports, and I know you don't have access to the New World. So just if you could, is it possible? And I know it is possible on your.
1 second, please, Mr. Griffith.
Okay. All right.
We're getting some feedback from conversations.
Yeah, Morrow's not muted.
Well,
There you go.
I wish
Thanks.
everybody be muted except for the council people or people making presentations at this time. And at the end, when you have a chance to make comments, that'll be fine, but please, so we can hear everyone, please. Go ahead, Mr. Griffith, sorry.
That's all right, Mr. McGinley. Thank you. A question for you. I know New World will probably allow this, and I've been trying to get this type of report run, but possibly you could, is it possible that you could run a report with just the items that have exceeded the budget on the expenditure side for council at some point, maybe and I don't want to create extra work for budget and finance. I think that's probably not something that's really difficult to do, but if New World would generate a report that just shows us the items that have exceeded the budget in our annual or quarterly reports that you provide to council, I think it would be really helpful. I mean, I go through this whole budget and look at things that are over budget, and a lot of the things that I just go out to New World and take a look and see why. And so I don't have a lot of questions, but I think it would be very beneficial for members of council to see, especially at this point of the year, how many items were actually over budget on the expenditure side. On the revenue side, that would be helpful, but I don't think that's as critical as the expenditure side as we go closer to budget time. If you could generate that report, I think New York will allow us to do that. So that would be helpful. And the other question that I have for you, I see there's $1.3 million in our $5 fee fund. I just was wondering, are we obligated to get rid of that before we terminate this $5 fee, or can Mr. O'Neill answer that we can use that money for the bridges, even though the $5 fee has been extinguished?
So I'll take the first one first. I think a simple solution, and I appreciate people reading the reports and going through line by line, but to make it easier for council, and since you're getting a detailed report quarterly now, I think that's something that quarterly we can easily add, or add, maybe monthly during the budget season and quarterly the rest of the year. So yes, we can run a report that we can add that would only be a few pages, would be the hope, that would show everything that's over budget or over budget year to date, at least on a quarter. On the second part, I don't know. I don't know if it's, 12/31, and I don't believe 12/31 comes and that money needs to go back, even though we're not collecting anymore. I don't know if that's a solicitor question or if that's a operations question. So I understand what you're asking me. I don't really think it's a budget and finance question.
Mr. O'Neill is on the line. If he can answer the $5 fee. Although my understanding is it's in place until the end of the year. And we use the money and we get the match. So Ed?
Yes. As far as the funds that we've collected, we do not have to have them expended by the end of the year because we are terminating the fee. It was understood and contracted with the state for our match and for the projects that we put towards getting our match, the time frames and timelines. And I know that the bridge on Hillside Road was not scheduled to be construction to be started until well into 2022. So that does not have to be used or utilized or zeroed out by the end of this year.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mr. Swets, while we have you on the line, you want to do 5 and 6?
Sure, if you give me a second to scroll down on the PDF, I have it open. Just give me 2 seconds and we'll do all of them at once. That's fine. So for number 5, you have in front of you, I actually had hoped to get it on the previous meeting. That was the state closure. I believe Mr. Griffith had sent an email, and somehow in the midst of getting things together, this was the 2.1 million that we received. We are passed through, and this goes to municipalities that were impacted by the state closure. It spells out the impacted municipalities. At this point, we don't have a time frame on when the money needs to be sent. So I don't know if it's going to be 2021 or 2022. In speaking with the Office of Law, our thought was if we add it as a 2021 budget amendment and it doesn't happen, it will be revenue and expense that's both over budget by the same amount versus trying to do something at the last minute as we have the budget hearings. So we physically received the 2.1 million. We don't know when it's going to be sent out. And those funds were deliberately left blank because it is going to be a new fund. I think to the question of the previous meeting, I didn't want to put in 526 if council was going to use that for something else. So we're looking at a new fund where county receives the money and it goes through the impacted municipalities. And we'll have that for the next meeting. We should have the fund and the department number.
Okay.
Mr. McGinley, I have a question on 5. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Swets, on that 2.1 million that we received, what account did that get logged into at this point? Do you know? the number?
I know when they initially, and this is one of the things I've mentioned before, when we get state or federal money, it has to be an account that we already have. So even
Right.
if on the front end, we went to council and said we want a new fund and we want a new bank account, well, obviously we handle the bank accounts. But even if we did that, the state will say, give us the last 4 digits of an account that we sent money to before. So you will usually see an email that in the interim, the money goes to the general fund and then is transferred out. And I believe that was the case with this 2.1 million.
Okay, and a follow-up on that is that, and I look back through the history of this whole state closure money, and there were some comments made by Representative Mullery and a couple others when that whole thing happened with Retreat and the Whitehaven Center, with the concern that the county was going to get the money and have to divvy it out to the municipalities along the way. And they had a big discussion about how they felt that that wasn't right, that municipalities should be getting the money directly and all of that stuff that happened back in the day. So my question is, are we going to require at some point these municipalities to send us a breakdown of some sort that says what their ask is for the money and what their impact was from the state closure? Because I think that's what the money was given to us based on the fact that there was revenue lost by those municipalities. So if you could answer, are we going to require that from those municipalities so we make sure everybody gets their fair amount?
My understanding is that they're going to get the amount either way, but I would definitely want to confirm that before we just send out a check. So I need to go back and look at this grant. But my thought was when the 2.1 million was given out, it was based on you had a facility in your township, municipality, borough that was impacted, and this is your money. I would agree. It would have been simpler if it just went to, the county wasn't the middle person, but that's not what happened. That's not the way it was sent to us. So I think they'll get it regardless, but just like anything else, whether it be CARES funding or whether it be ARP funding, I think it's prudent that we get something from either the legislative body or an invoice. So we have something to show that it was requested. I don't want to get into the point where somebody says they requested this money and we don't have any kind of trail. So I do believe that, we should get a formal request, whether that's an email or a canceled check, I'll have to look into, but that's my thoughts right now.
Yeah, and I asked that because as you see from the list of municipalities, some like Newport Township was probably more impacted by the closure than say maybe Plymouth Borough or Foster Township or possibly the city of Nanticoke. They may have not had as much of an impact because maybe more people worked at Retreat that was from Newport Township for lack of a better, because we're basically reimbursing them for their lack of local taxes and things of that nature. So I'm just curious as to, and I read the state closure program law that was out there for the DCED, and there's nothing in there that actually says that they have to submit something to us. We're the fiduciary responsible person to divvy out this money. And so my question is, rather than say, well, we have 2.1 million and we're going to separate it by 5 municipalities and everybody gets the same piece, which I don't think is fair. I think we should require each municipality to send us some document, as you just said, that says how much were they impacted by the closure and how much are they requesting from the county. And then, I don't know how we would have to play referee on that, but I just don't know how we're going to divvy that money out. It puts us in a bad spot.
Okay. Mr. Swets, number 6.
So number 6 is similar to some of these other grants that we've had. It's a ERA program. This is probably the third one, but 2 were run by one organization and the third. So we sort them by funding source. Is it U.S. Department of Justice? Is it DCD? So when we actually put these together, that's how we do it. I know we've gone through some of the money, and I remember seeing an article in the paper, if it wasn't this week, last week, about applications, and I believe CEOs handling the day-to-day process. But this was just additional money that's coming in for emergency rental housing. We received the money, so we need to account for it. I know there's obviously a need. Whether we're going to use all this money or not, I don't know, and I'm not sure Mr. Riley knows, but this money was given to us for that purpose, and that's why it's on the agenda.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. Ms. Corcoran, you want to take number 2, the Kayak
Yes.
Launch grant?
Yes, yes. At the last meeting, there were some inquiries about the status. Just to go over historically, we requested assistance from the National Park Service on June 13th, 2017. The steering committee meetings were held in 2018 and 2019. The River Common Renewal Action Plan, a draft version, was completed on March 30th of 2020. The DCNR application submission was approved by council on March 31st, 2020. And the DCNR application was submitted in April 2020. And the DCNR award letter was received October 1st, 2020. The DCNR grant contract and date is until December 31st of 2024. Ed O'Neill is on. I can have him give particulars, but I can tell you in dealing with DCED, we need to, they're asking us to attest that we own the property. And we do not own the property. We have an easement on the property. So I have been trying to negotiate or figure out terms that would be acceptable to them. And I will probably this week be reaching out to the Office of Law to help me with that as well. But Ed, if you want to add anything else to the status of the grant or the plans, I ask you to do that now.
Yes, I would just like to comment, maybe make a few comments regarding the grant. I believe it was a $500,000 grant with a 50% match.
Yes.
So we were awarded on the amount of $250,000 with the requirement to contribute the same. At that time, we didn't have the money secured, but it was discussed internally, and the plan, at least tentatively at that point, well before we were aware of the award, was that we would most likely try to utilize recreation funding to come up with that match. Since then, some things have changed. Much of that recreation funding is being utilized for other things such as maintenance on the riverfront, and some salaries that are being taken care of through budget finance. In addition, our 2021 allocation reduced by almost a third, came in, I believe it's just over $187,500, if I'm not mistaken. So the amount was reduced significantly from the years prior. That being said, and the fact that funding is based somewhat on economic conditions, and realizing that the reduction was due primarily to changes that occurred in our society with COVID, and that probably will not be likely to jump back up for next year's allocation based on the current status of COVID. We don't think that there's enough money in that fund even to spread out over 2 years to come up with a $250,000 match. So that being said, we have a grant we've been given, and we've been awarded based on the stipulation. We have a match. We don't have a matching plan, a plan for the match right now, and that is where we are with the overall project. We've had some preliminary work done, some borings, and some preliminary design work done. So at this point, that's where the project stands.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Haas, go ahead.
comments and some questions if I could.
Yeah,
Hey,
go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. O'Neill. Thanks for sharing the information about the current situation. I always got to tip my hat to you too. The River Common looks great. Thank you for enabling that to happen with who's ever contracted out. It really is great from just a few years ago. So thanks again. And I think the kayak launch would be an asset there, but the $250,000 is a lot of money, and that rec fund is being appropriately used there. But also, we need road and bridge repair. That's probably the number one issue most of us hear about here on this council. So I'd like going forward to see us maybe even consider those avenues and how to spend some of the Act 13 money. But I wanted to ask if Does the county have to provide the match in the grant application, or can the county partner with like Wilkes-Barre City, the Riverfront Parks, maybe other outfitters or private enterprise out there, instead of this just coming from county taxes? I mean, I think some people would be interested in it, but I don't know if that's appropriate about how the grant's written.
Well, I can't really speak to that. I would have to investigate and get back to you on that. I would think that if there were associated parties such as the city and the Riverfront Parks Committee that somehow were able to come up with some funding, I'm thinking that would have to be done on a reimbursement basis since we were the recipients of the grant. But I'm just speaking off the top of my head. I'd have to really make inquiries about that to find out more detail.
Yeah.
I
mean,
can tell you that
yeah.
in my discussions with DCED about ownership, I did say that it was Wilkes-Barre City, and I was told, well, you're the grant applicant. So I don't know if that bodes well with your idea, Councilman Hawes, but we'll follow up with that when I have discussions with the rep.
Yeah. No, I really appreciate that. It'd be nice to make this work, but again, not at the expense of some of these other projects, because we kayak a lot. We kayak several times this summer. We put in there at Nesbitt, and we put down in Hanover too, down the ramps down there. So I'm all about building up the area, but boy, we got a lot of critical projects around here. But thanks for following through on that too.
Mr. McGinley?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. O'Neill and council, I think at some point council has to vote that we actually want to do a kayak launch at all. I mean, our vote that was taken back when Mr. Pedri brought it to council was to apply for the grant. We never, ever approved as council the building of the kayak launch of any sort. He asked if council would approve him looking into getting the grant, and council approved, yes, it was okay. Now, at some point, now that we have approval from the state for the grant, I think council should approve whether we want to actually go forward with getting a $250,000 match to move forward with the grant before we worry about whether we have ownership or anything of that nature for the actual construction of the kayak launch. Personally, I feel the same way as Mr. Hawes. I think, we're going to take $250,000 of taxpayers' money on a boat launch that maybe 1% of the population in Luzerne County may or may not use. We have many more people in this county that are in need of road repair, as well as other things that $250,000 can go to. That Act 13 money, we can use that for anything we want, and unfortunately, we tend to be using it on things that aren't probably as important as they should be. So I think what we need to do as council is to decide if we actually want to move forward with a kayak launch or not. And then Mr. O'Neill can proceed, or Ms. Crocomo can proceed as the manager to pursue the execution of the grant.
Mr. McGill?
Yep.
Just a quick question. Could there be some creative mechanism in there to allow private industry to maybe donate the money, and then maybe, like anything else, put an advertisement on the boat launch or the kayak launch, sponsored by somebody or so-and-so? Is that a mechanism that the county could utilize going out to the private sector and have them donate the money into an account and then come up with the match in that regard versus using taxpayer money?
Certainly an option that we can explore. I don't know, what the time frame we would have, but definitely we can reach out to private industry.
Okay, thank you. Number 3, discussion regarding the resolution committing a local match for the Luzerne County Transportation Authority pursuant to the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. Ms. Crocomo?
Yes, that was on the agenda last week. And I had said that I would have a representative from PennDOT here to explain to council the nature of the grant, the nature of the work, and take any questions that you have. And if he cannot answer them tonight, and I cannot answer them tonight, we would get you that information. So I am going to turn the microphone over to Andy Batson. Andy? He has his hand up. Oh, there. Okay.
There we go. I got it working. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me here. Happy to answer any questions. I'll give you just a brief overview. Not sure how much you're aware of the project. It's for a completely new operations and maintenance facility for Luzerne County Transportation Authority. It's at the former Murray complex there in Wilkes-Barre, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. The project's been moving for at least 5 years. I don't know the exact time frame, but as you know, it's the land has been demolished. It's been being prepped for a while. We reached 100% design here over the summer, and the project is out to bid right now with the bids due back next week on October 7th. And the project, just to give you a little bit more detail, it's about a 200,000 square foot facility. It'll put all of LCTA's vehicles indoors, which is really important to us, and especially the harsh winters you have there. It will allow space and there's a lot of safety elements we installed for a plan for employees, letting them space out a little bit with everything that's going on now, but also in the future. It's fully CNG compliant. It'll feature a CNG, compressed natural gas fueling station for the vehicles, of which I think LCTA has about 20 at this point, which they're fueling up by Pittston. And overall, we think it's a pretty good project. Just to put what our role is, PennDOT provides technical assistance. I'm part of the Bureau of Public Transportation. We provide technical assistance to transit agencies throughout the Commonwealth to help keep these projects moving, help them make sure that they have responsible engineers and construction managers that do the job that we know have the capacity to be able to do it. And that's what we have here. So the last part I just wanted to talk about is the local match requirement. It's a little bit of a moving target, and that's why you'll see in your packet there that there's a range. We'll know exactly what it needs to be when the bids come in next week. The requirement for local match is 3 1/3% of the state funding, which is a pretty good deal. In state government, 3 1/3% is a pretty incredibly low match percentage. And with the the infusion of the American Rescue Plan Act funds, which seem to fit this project nicely, we're hopefully we can make that happen. LCTA already received $350,000 from the gaming funds. I know they just applied for another $350,000. So it's really a moving target, but we need that local match to be able to fully commit the state funds, which match federal funds. So I'm happy to answer any questions or go into more details.
Go ahead, Ms. Seddon, go ahead.
Do you have anything that you're going to put there in this building or place for the storage that is going to have ability to, eventually I think our buses will be electric. Is there going to be anything in terms of electric stations?
That's a great question. There's a lot of movement in propulsion technologies in general. Right now, the state's engaged in a public-private partnership for compressed natural gas, of which LCTA will be a part. That deal extends until 2030 something, maybe a little bit longer, which we think is great. It's much cheaper than diesel fuel. It is cleaner, but we did make sure that the design of the facility is capable of handling electric charging and that type of aspects in the future. So it's a long round-winded answer, not now, but in the future there could be.
Okay.
Yes, I have a question. What is the match is what 3 1/3% you said of the state contribution?
Right.
How long a time are we obligated for that? 1 year, 2 years, over a course of 4 years, over a course of construction? How does that?
So that would be over the course of construction. The way it works is you basically establish a formula that this percentage is federal, this percentage is state, this percentage is local, and then an invoice that LCTA submits to us is paid out across that ratio. So the local match is really spread across the entire duration of the construction period, which we anticipate to be about 2 years. 2
years from the start of the construction?
From the start of construction, right? So we're looking, Yeah, construction hopefully will start here around the end of 2021, assuming everything goes well. So you're looking at the end of 2023.
Thank you.
Mr. McGinley?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
Go ahead, Walter.
We didn't have an amount?
Okay, thanks, Harry. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hold on
the
one second, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Ms. McDermott has a question.
Yeah, I was just going to ask if you had an idea of how much that amount was, 3 1/3%. Is there any round figures, ballpark figure?
So our estimate right now, and again, we'll know firm numbers likely next week, is in total between 1 and 1.2 million. And there's already 350,000 that's secured, which leaves, about a $750,000 gap. I think the range that was provided to you was 650,000 to 850,000. And like we said, some of that may be covered by this new LSA application that was put in. But hard to tell quite yet.
Okay, so that is the 3 1/3% then, about 650 to 850,000.
Right. So it's a return of about $1 to about $60 back in federal and state funds.
Thank you.
Mr. Griffith?
Thank you, Mr. McGinley. The question that I have is, can the LCTA use their reserve funding for this match money? They have a significant amount of money sitting in a reserve account that quite honestly, quite frankly, I mean, we're using this LSA money to fund this. The LSA money from the casino was supposed to be to reduce taxes in the county. That was the whole selling point for the casino. Yet nobody has realized any of that money in reduced taxes. We divvy it out to all these nonprofits or all these non-taxable entities as candy money for their projects, of which, the taxpayers are not getting the benefit from the casino. So we're giving them local share account money at 350,000, plus they're applying for another one. And there's absolutely none of their money that they're using from the profit of running that bus company being used for any of this construction. Can they use their reserve, or do we have to put it in?
They cannot use their reserve. The legislation stipulates that it has to be local cash contribution. I will say their reserve is from state funds. So it would be state money matching state money, which we also can't do.
So if the county doesn't come up with the matching money, they have to raise it some other way.
Right. It has to come from a local municipality or county, and it has to be cash. It can't be in-kind contributions.
So maybe what we should do is ask LCTA to go to all the municipalities of where they serve, as we were trying to do with Hazleton many weeks ago when we had that same issue with Hazleton, is we were trying to drive Hazleton into the position where they had to go to Schuylkill County and all those things to get extra money because we didn't want to match their funds. So maybe LCTA needs to go to every municipality and have them use their LSA money that they get and use it for a contributing match for the LCTA to build that structure. So if you have 76 municipalities and they service maybe 60 of them, each of those 60 municipalities should pony up some money through their LSA account money and give it to the LCTA to help them, so the county doesn't have to do it.
Mr. Haas, you had a question?
Yeah, I did. Thanks, Mr. Gatson, for coming out tonight. I'm looking here. I don't remember, and I've served on this council for 10 years now. I don't remember ever hearing that the county needed a match in the first place with this project. I don't know if you can talk about the genesis of that.
Yeah, I mean, the match has always been a condition of any state funding. It's just like the match that you all provide to their operating funds every year, that they come before you on. I will tell you that traditionally we don't get involved in the matching discussions. We leave that to the local transit authorities. But you all asked me to come on today. Happy to do that. So unfortunately, it may be one of the first times you're hearing about that, but okay. It's the way the legislation's been around since 2007, I believe.
Yeah, I'm sorry you get to miss out on that fund, but that's helpful. Yeah. There, we're getting a giant $3.5 trillion infrastructure bill coming through, ramming through the Congress, of course, and I'm sure there'll be some appropriate funds for something like this. Because when we were at a commissioners conference, I think Ms. Taylor can attest to this too, my colleague across the table there, that we can use some of the ARP funds, the American Recovery Plan funds, to have our just local match on an annual basis for these past 2 years that were the COVID years. And that's what we were told. I forget, I think it was Larry Shiflett that communicated that to us, but I'm just assuming that's still a go. I'd like to see us definitely use funds to match that. This one, of course, is a little heavier lift. Have you had any other transportation authorities or other communities use private industry to offset these costs? Walter has put forth some good ideas there. Any other creative ways to finance that you're aware of?
Not that I'm aware of. There's pretty limited opportunities to use private funds for this particular funding source. And that was the way the legislation was written. I know there are a number of authorities across the Commonwealth that are going through these projects right now. Schuylkill County is building their facility. They're about 2/3 of the way complete. That was about a $35 million project, give or take. There's a couple out in Western Pennsylvania that are ongoing right now or recently completed. There's a couple in Central Pennsylvania. So it's pretty common. Unfortunately, the legislation really does stipulate that it's local cash. A big reason for that, I believe, is that the level of state funding that's provided for transit in Pennsylvania is substantially more than any other state in the country. And that, I think, is the way to provide a little bit of local buy-in to the project and support the project and make sure that's done the way that that it needs to be done to support the local community.
Harry, you're still muted.
Jeepers, thanks, Walt. Sorry about that, everybody. I was just saying, since this discussion here, we know our transit system serves a lot of our industrial parks here and carries much needed workers to and from. And we already have given a lot of tax abatements out of those properties. It's another ask, but have you heard of industrial parks giving up that component of private enterprise to help make sure that workers can make it to their source of employment? We know workers are not showing up these days.
Yep, I do know it's a pretty popular thing right now from the operating perspective. On the operating side of the house, there's some great examples. Your incoming executive director, Bob Fume, and I have talked about it multiple times actually recently about some other projects. So I'm happy in the future to talk about that if anybody needs to, would like to. But yeah, a lot of places in Pennsylvania are doing that right now with industrial.
Okay, so not for capital projects, but for operating expenses.
Right.
Okay,
Right. They can
thank you
help
very
separate.
much. Thanks again
Yep.
for coming.
Mr. Batson, if I can. The only other question that I had for you was the Hazleton Public Transit. In Hazleton, they're building an intermodal center. Are they going to have do you know of anything coming that they're going to need matching funds for as well?
I thought that was completed, Mr. Sneed.
Yeah, I think they are all set. I know the funding plan for them has been in place for a little while, and they are under construction right now. So I don't anticipate, I can't speak on behalf of the city of Hazleton or Ralph Sharp there, but I don't believe that they have an additional funding need for that project.
Okay, and just to clarify, if I look at the resolution here, it does say that this money is going to come from the American Recovery Plan Act. I assume that's a legitimate expense from that $112 million that the county received. We can take $1 million out of there for this if we so choose to do that.
Yes, there was a change in the fiscal code this last fiscal year that allowed that to be an eligible matching source for a certain period of time. And this year is one of those years you can do that. So.
Mr. Griffith, I think the Hazleton project had a grand opening. I think Mr. Sneed and Mr. Perry, didn't you attend? So I think that's probably just about complete or at this point. So.
Okay, thank you for that information. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Actually, Mr. McGinley, is there a way that you can get us a citation of the rule or the law that shows that we could use this money? Because I know it has been brought up in past council meetings that, other people have come here for requesting funds, and we're still operating under the itinerant final rule, waiting for the final rule. I mean, that's been the mantra of this council and the majority of this council for a while now. And all of a sudden, LCTA is coming here asking for money to match for a project. And it seems like we're going to go off the rails here as a council to possibly support your project, but maybe not others. And it might be unfair to those other entities as well. So can you provide that documentation to us?
Sure, I can provide you the documentation that shows that it's an eligible match for the state funding source. As far as the eligible project type, I think that's a question that I would leave to your law office or someone else that may know more specifics. But
we'll get you that, Tim.
Federal is it permissible under the federal law or the federal rules?
Councilman Urban, we will get you that information.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. We appreciate your waiting and thank you for the information. If we have any other further questions, I'm sure we'll be contacted. Thank you for hanging on with us this evening.
Thanks,
Absolutely.
Andy. Thank you
Thanks
very
so much. Yep. Bye.
Down to number 4, discussion regarding the resolution approving forgiveness of delinquent tax interest and penalties owed to Luzerne County by the Greater Wilkes-Barre Chamber of Business and Industry. Mr. Wico.
Mr. Wico is here with us.
Okay. Do you want to go ahead?
Yes. So, well, good evening, Chairman McGinley, County Council, County Manager. Thank you for placing the Poseidon Pools delinquent back taxes tax day resolution for consideration in your working session. The intent of the resolution is more to resolve a discrepancy in the taxes owed rather than a request for forgiveness relative to the back taxes owed by Poseidon Pools when they went bankrupt in 1999. At that time, a tax stay agreement was put in place by the county to enable the chamber to take over the property and mitigate it, clean it up. In doing so, the taxes were to be adjusted per the tax stay agreement to have us pay the full face value of the delinquent taxes, which we absolutely will do, while keeping the interest and penalty amount to 10%, which we will pay. In addition, we were to make payments of no less than $10K a year to be applied to the face value principal, which we did. The issue in a nutshell is that the 10% terms on the penalty and interest were not applied per the tax stay agreement to the current tax bureau number. So what I've done is I've submitted 3 documents for your review. And if you'd like, Mr. Chair and County Council, I can certainly detail out these documents. Would you like me to go through them?
Yes, please. You're on the line and would help us with any information.
So the first one is actually the second, I think, in the packet that you were sent. It's the Luzerne County Tax Claim Bureau delinquent taxes due. That reflects that we owe the full face value, which is true, we will pay that, but in addition that we owe the full interest and penalty, which is incorrect. And those amounts, just so that we can itemize them out, it's $188,000 for the face amount owed. So basically you're adding the $34,261, the $34,727, the $34,727, the $28,098, and you add them up, it comes out to $188 of a face amount owed. Then if you look at the county penalties, it adds up to $18,000 in penalties. And if you look at the interest owed, it's $406,000 in interest. And when you add all of that up, it comes out to $612,000, but you will note that we did pay $55,000 already paid. So you take that off and you've got the $557 that you see on that document. You'll also note that we did pay out Wright Township and Crestwood Schools with a settlement that did not include penalty and interest with an early payout that I had offered to the county 2 years ago. So you'll note their money due is at 0. But now that we are, moving to settlement for this property, we will pay the full amount to the county. So that's basically document number 1. The second document is actually the 1999 tax stay agreement, spelling out the terms of the tax stay. And you'll note on page 3, number 4, that should the property be sold, which we are now right up to settlement, we would pay out the face amount delinquency of that 188 plus 10% of the interest and penalty less any payments made. So to place this in context, you might recall it was done because Poseidon Pools went bankrupt. The land was contaminated and needed considerable funds to clean it up and mitigate it. So the chamber took this project on, agreed to pay the full face value of delinquent Poseidon Pool back taxes plus 10% and interest should we get it cleaned and be able to sell it. And now with our DEP Act 2 clearance that we just got, in July, we can move forward with that sale. So that basically talks to the tax day agreement from 1999. The third document really reflects what happens when you apply the face value less any payments made plus 10% interest and penalty. So if you add the numbers up once again, it's $188,000 face value. The $18,080 in penalties at 10% is $1,880. The penalties for, the interest at 10% is $40,634. If you total those, it comes out to $230,524.
You need to speak up. It's hard to hear you.
Oh, I'm so sorry. So when you add those up, the total is $230,524.98 minus the $55,587.41 that we paid, and that makes the remaining due at $174,937.57 that is owed. So kind of in conclusion, we'd like the resolution to essentially meet the terms of the 1999 tax stay agreement, which limits interest and penalty to 10%, apply any funds already paid to the principal, so we can move forward with the settlement with Miracle Commercial Real Estate so they can develop the property and bring it back into our county economy. Having the county council rectify the back taxes to reflect the tax stay agreement will allow us to proceed to settlement and result in the following: full payout of the delinquent taxes from the Poseidon bankruptcy, resulting in a county tax payout of $174,937.57. Also, the sale would provide full payout of the last remaining county HUD BDLP loan of $925,000 to place back into the revolving fund. And then, in essence, it fulfills my debt obligation that I had promised you all 7 years ago, that, you know, we would pay out the debt obligations of the county, and that would then total $7 million, with $6 million that we've done in payouts since 2014, and now this $1 million with the Poseidon sale. So with the Poseidon property receiving final Act 2 clearance on our efforts to remove and mitigate the contaminants on the property, we can finally bring the property back into the local economy, fulfill the full debt obligations that I had promised to council that I would resolve when I first met with you all my first week on the job 7 years ago. And, you know, basically, as I get set to retire in January, I feel really comfortable that we should be able to pay all this out by the end of the year. So thanks for your consideration through the resolution to reflect the 1999 tax stay agreement so we can move forward to settlement, finalize our county debt obligations in full. And again, we're not asking really for any forgiveness. We're really just asking to adjust it to the 1999 tax stay agreement. So with that said, are there any questions for your working session that I can help you with to bring this to vote in another 2 weeks?
Okay, Ms. Hawkins and Mr. Orban.
Okay, thanks, Rico. I really appreciated seeing all of this in the packet. I did the math myself too, and I understand where you're coming up with that number. My question is it's in our packet, it's the page that has yellow highlighted lines on it. I don't know if you have access to that.
Sure, is that the final page one? Go ahead.
Yes, it is. So my question is, there is a payment of $55,587.41 in 1994. And then in the next 5 years, there were payments made to the city and to the school, but none to the county. Can you explain that?
Yeah, so actually that's what happened is that actually the money that we paid out was applied to just 1994. So we've actually been paying out $10,000 since actually
2000, right?
Yeah, since 2000. And then prior to that, we also paid a $60,000, I think, initial installment at the very beginning. So what happened with the county is they applied it all to 1994. So it looks like it's not being applied to anything else. And actually, it should have been applied to the principal. Relative to the city and the county, this is what I mentioned in the beginning, that 2 years ago, we had offered to pay out, you know, the full face value of these notes. And the county, the township, Wright Township, and the school district took us up on that offer. And you guys wanted to wait it out, and that's where we're at this point, in which we are actually going to pay you guys more. We will pay the penalty and interest at the 10%. Does that answer your question?
Kind of, yes, but I guess the question is though, when it doesn't actually say in the agreement that it would be applied to the principal. It does say that it would be less any payments that are owed. But nevertheless, you paid $10,000 each year since 2000, right? Because that's in the agreement. So was that divided among the taxing authorities, or?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. And we would have seen that applied somewhere. It would be somewhere in our real estate tax income. Is that where we would expect to see it? Okay.
Yeah, that's correct. And in fact, again, since we paid out the the county, the Wright Township and the school district, the 10,000, for example, that we paid this year would have been fully applied, or should have been fully applied again. That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Really good work. I understand that. I met you when you first came, and I know that this has been a goal of yours to get out from under all the debt that the chamber had. So congratulations on that.
Sure. Two questions, I guess, more legal questions. Number one is this maybe to Solicitor DeLuca. Hold on a second.
What is going on? Harris?
All right. Number one to Solicitor DeLuca, is it standard practice for Attorney Craig to be sending emails from private practice like this is a county matter, and this is coming from her law office email address? That's number one, but that's a smaller issue. On page 4 of the agreement, it shows only one county commissioner at the time signing off on this agreement, and I don't think Mr. Mikowski could do this unilaterally without the approval of the other 2 commissioners. Plus, at the bottom, it's not even consented or dated, nor does it have any signature from the Tax Claim Bureau. Is this even legal? Since it doesn't appear to be executed properly from a county perspective. Was this done at a commissioners meeting? Because there are no attestations from the county, from anybody on the county except for Mr. Mikowski, and he's only one out of 3 commissioners at the time. So I don't see how this agreement could be legal on its face, because you need 2 commissioners to actually execute.
You don't necessarily need 2 commissioners to execute. You needed at least 2 out of the 3 commissioners to vote at a public meeting to actually approve it. They could authorize a single county commissioner to actually execute the agreement. So that would be, I believe, a partial answer to your second question. I have no idea what your issue is with Ms. Craig sending an email. I don't even know which email you're referring to. With her private office email address, but I do know that Ms. Craig had some issues with access to her county email, and she is very diligent in the work she does for the county. So she, in order to get back to me and also to members of council, she may have used her private office email for certain things.
Can we go back and review the minutes at the time of 1999 to see if this agreement was actually voted on by the commissioners at the time?
This is, you need me to pull the minutes from when?
1999, or whenever this agreement was executed, back in June of 99. I mean, it appears, I mean, the agreement was executed back on June 9th, 1999. So if you know, Mr. McCaskey was given permission to sign off on this, I would assume that it would be done in a public meeting or a public environment.
I really
There's no
don't know.
blessing behind closed doors.
Again, if you would like, if you have an issue that you want me to do legal review on, it would be helpful if you could give me a heads up, or if you could contact me tomorrow, and we'll be able to get whatever information you want. It does no good, though. I'm telling you, because it's just the reality. I'm not going to give you legal advice at the meeting on a matter that I haven't had an opportunity to review, and none of my assistants had an opportunity to review. It's not fair to them. It's not fair to my office, and it certainly does not do anything to promote my office giving you the best legal advice I could give you.
That's fine. I mean, I'm just bringing it to people's attention in a public forum because I believe in transparency, and I also believe in the rule of law here. So, you know, quite honestly, when I see something like this, you know, I've been told by other attorneys, like in the case of the Avoca issue, if it's not signed, we're not obligated to follow the agreement. It's not dated on the back page. So, you know, with due respect, when you do wish to bring these items in public, I would be able to participate in the discussion with information if you provide me with this information before we come to a public meeting. It does no good to have you bring up these items if I haven't been briefed on it beforehand, or if you haven't at least given us an opportunity to get you the answers that you want before the meeting. It could save everyone a lot of time. It could also resolve an issue, and we could either, I could show you what the law is on whatever issue you have, or we could agree to disagree. But right now, I have no opinion on what you're presenting because I haven't even been advised of it until this moment.
Mr. McGinley?
Okay. Well, I mean, I'm just saying, you know, this is something I discovered tonight just by reviewing the documents. I don't always have a chance to review everything in advance like everybody else, and the group of professionals at the county should be bringing that forward or even noticing this type of stuff before it comes to this chamber.
Mr. McGinley, I'm just wondering if we would have the archives in our office. The online, the commissioner meetings are there, but they only go back to January 2004.
There are minutes.
Maybe we could look up the minutes for some of those meetings in May or June within our office.
They're there.
Right.
Yeah, you know, I don't know the exact dates, but I do see them.
Well, it's 1999.
Yeah, no, I'm not, I don't know the exact dates.
Oh, what's in there? Right.
Anything else for Mr. Rico? Thank you.
Thank
We're
you.
moving
Thanks
to
for the
number 7.
opportunity.
Thank you.
Discussion regarding the resolution amending the resolution 2000-101 to establish administrative assistant position in the office of clerk of county council. If you remember, we established the position by resolution, and then we redid the job description and made it a part-time position. So at this point, we have to redo the resolution to reflect the fact it's a part-time position. And Ms. Houck has done some work on that, but I'm not sure if that work is sent forward.
I send it out between the meetings.
Oh, between meetings? Okay.
Yeah, so do you want to talk about that now, or do you want to wait until the?
Either or, whatever you want to do. I'm
Okay,
fine.
well, let me just explain then what I sent out, and you'll see it in your email. Essentially, we need to modify resolution 2021-101 and establish an assistant position. The amendment, or the resolution that I sent out, says that we unanimously approve that resolution providing for an administrative assistant position, but we hereby want to modify the parameters of the position that was created by that resolution. And so what it says is the position shall be identified as the assistant to the clerk, not the administrative assistant. The position shall be a part-time exempt service position with an hourly rate of pay with a job description as defined on the attached document. And here we would need to attach the job description that we approved last week. And the position shall be created and filled in accordance with the county personnel code, which is all part of the other next changes are the to remove the word administrative, to just say assistant to the clerk of council. And then at the end, it says the assistant shall work at the direction and under the supervision of the clerk of county council and the chair of council. Those are the changes. And that would just modify the resolution that we passed. We don't have to create a new position. We're just going to pass a resolution to modify the one that we already created.
Okay. Number 8, discussion regarding a motion to allow Robert Bilbo to advertise the county-owned property for sale. And Ms. McDermott?
Yes,
You want to
Mr.
speak to that?
Bilbo would like to purchase 2 lots in Hanover Township. And this is in the Linwood area. The 2 parcels are not contiguous. They are one is 0.15 acres, the other one is 0.14 acres. They are located between the Wyoming Valley Sanitary Authority and the communication tower. The parcel ending in, well, the one ending in 0.002 is directly across the street from the road that goes to the sewer plant. And the other one is on a paper street. Both are in a flood zone, but are protected by the levee. And they're too small to build on. And they are not desirable and not marketable. And Mr. Bilbo is offering $500 a piece for each of those, so $1,000 total. And the next step would be for him to advertise, so council can vote at the next meeting, I guess, to approve him to advertise, just to advertise. Any questions?
I guess my only question is, did we ever finalize that procedure, the revision?
No, waiting for that, we have the auction coming up, which I mentioned that, the meeting work. Waiting for that to be finalized because we're going through different steps and it is a process that we've never done before. So once that's complete, we can at least add that into the procedure. And then there are a couple other things that are coming up too that we can add into it. So still working on it, but waiting for that to be completed.
Okay. So that'll be on our voting agenda. Number 9, discussion regarding counteroffer to Mr. DeAndrea. Mr. DeAndrea has been here for a long time. Appreciate him hanging out with us for 3 hours, I guess, at this point.
So I'll just fill everybody in, remind you of what took place back in the beginning of the year. So Mr. DeAndrea would like to purchase 48.33 acres of vacant land in Hollenbeck Township for $20,000. The assessed value on that is $77,300. He submitted the packet back on September 1st of 2020. The real estate committee discussed it on February 16th, and council discussed it in February 23rd work session. And we decided at that time to have Mr. DeAndrea get an appraisal. He hired Cheryl Roman, a certified residential appraiser, who did the appraisal in May. Her appraised value is $17,000, which works out to, if you read through the appraisal report, it comes out to $346 an acre. Her reasons for such a low number are, the one is the land is landlocked, meaning there's no access except to gain permission from an adjacent property owner. But in Pennsylvania, there is no land that is landlocked, but a buyer would have to obtain an easement of necessity from the courts. And this could potentially cost as much as $10,000 to $20,000. However, in this case, Mr. DeAndrea does own adjacent property and does have legal access to this land. Further comment was that the land is steep and not buildable. There's no access to power, water, sewer. Hunters are willing to pay a lot for hunting land. So this is one of the things that she did mention in the appraisal report was that this is desirable to hunters or to timber. She did provide one and only one comparable sale. Usually there's 3 on there, but she did have 1. And that is a quitclaim deed. So with that, no one really knows what the purchase price is. So it's hard to use it as a comparable. She probably could have used any land sale and made an adjustment and deducted the negative effect of obtaining an easement, which can cost a lot. Also, Mr. DeAndre wants to put the property into clean and green, so the taxable income would be about $1,200 a year. It's up to the assessment office to figure that. So a bigger purchase price would be valuable to the county. After talking it over with the assessment board, just a member, and also they checked it out on the GIS map and everything. Their final recommendation was to sell the property at $950 per acre. That would come out to $45,914. But at the real estate committee meeting, when we discussed it, we were going to recommend to council, or we did recommend to council, to submit a counteroffer of $45,000. Now, the goal, of course, is to sell county property. We don't want to keep it on hand, but we do want to do that by getting the biggest return for the county. So at this point, we'll invite Mr. DeAndrea to come up to the podium.
Mr. Chairman and council members, thank you very much for allowing me to speak this evening. As you're aware, I've been attempting to purchase this property since I found it on your GIS 2 years ago. Through the process, when I contacted the county, I was told that I had to submit an offer. So the only comparable I knew personally was the person who bought the piece of property on the other side of my hunting property. Now, my hunting property is owned by 3 separate individuals, not just myself. One of the people that bought that piece of property, it's 25 acres, paid $9,000 for that 25 acres. It was, I use the term landlocked, meaning that there was no access to it if you weren't one of the property owners that purchased it, unless you went to the court, petitioned the court for $10,000 to $20,000 and got an easement. So I knew that they had 25 acres and they paid $9,000. Now I know it's a quitclaim deed, but that property was offered to me by the people who bought it at a sheriff's sale, and they offered it to me for the same price, and I did not buy it. That's how I know or believe that that price is legitimate, and I'm not questioning the $9,000 for 25 acres. I then took it as, if I do the quick math, $9,000 for 25 acres, $18,000 for 50 acres. Since I was close to 50 acres, I offered the county what I thought was more money than the property was worth at $20,000. I submitted that packet, and then I was told that the county's process was that I then needed to pay for advertising. I paid for advertising. After that, I contacted the county again and found out that the next step was that I now needed to pay for an appraisal for the property. I asked if there was a list of appraisers I needed to pick from. I was informed to pick my own appraiser. I chose Lewitt and Freeman, Cheryl Roman, because she lives about 1.5 miles as the crow flies from this piece of property, and you can see the top of the mountain from her house. She's also very reputable and has done hundreds of appraisals for the county. When she came back to me and told me that the price that she appraised the property, first of all, I'm sorry, I had to drive her the 1.5 miles into my property on my access road. I then had to have her get on a quad and take her out to the far piece of my property where this parcel is. I can't take her to the top of the mountain because it's too steep. In the year 2000, I had my property logged, and they couldn't log that portion of the property because it's too steep. If I would not be me, if we sell this property to someone else, they'll have to petition the court for their $10,000 to $20,000 to get an easement over several pieces of property. The closest way in is 3/4 to 1 mile from a piece of hardtop, which means that they would then have to pay to put a road, whether it be 20 feet of an easement or 40 feet per power. And when I check on that, that's at least $40,000 to bulldoze a road and clean it up to get to the property. So we're at $50,000 to $60,000 that would be added expense. I look at it as, when I found out that she put the appraisal price at $17,000, I then felt, well, I'm leaving my offer at $20,000 stand because it is worth it to me because it's right next to my piece of property. I thought it was more than fair. I learned from the newspaper that that my bid or the appraisal was, I believe the term was used as lowball. That offended me simply because when you look up the definition of lowball, it's not being very legitimate above board. So I feel at this point, I don't think it's fair to council to ask you to abide by my offer of $20,000 appraisal, because when we get to the second paragraph here in the preamble, you need to be fair and equitable to everybody in the county. But I'm one of those people. So when I researched it, I've learned that the last time that I could find that this happened, it happened with the train station in the county where you had an appraisal and then the appraisal was questioned. And so you had an appraisal review. And when you did this for the train station, you used, I'm sorry, you used an individual by the name of Alan Rosen. And although I do not know Mr. Rosen, it seems to be the past practice of the county to have an appraisal review when it comes into question. It would be my thought that if you're allowed, that you have an appraisal review and we use the same person that you used the last time. And then that gives something county to hang your hat on. And if it comes in that it's the same price or Cheryl's appraisal is reviewed and it's correct, great. And if it comes back, then either way you have a way to vote. And I think at this point, it's only fair to you for me to not sit here and say, please go with her appraisal because you have your due diligence to show to everybody in the county. But I would respect or respectfully request that at least I'm allowed an appraisal review simply because I followed your process step by step by step and done everything you've asked. And I think it's only fair to me that since I asked who you want me to appraise it, and you told me to get my own appraisal, that now that I did, and all of her other appraisals have stood the test of time with the county, that I at least be allowed to have her appraisal reviewed instead of having to go back and forth with what we think it's valued at. That's all I have to say. I'm very gracious for your time, and I appreciate you hearing me on this matter. Does anybody have any questions for me? Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
The only thing I wanted to say about that too, with the procedure, that's another thing that when we discussed it, we were going back and forth, who should get the appraisal. And now, now we know, maybe it's the county that should pay. So we have to definitely figure out how to set up that procedure because this is unfair. People that want to purchase it, it's just it's not finalized.
May I add one thing, and it's just, I will pay for the appraisal review. It's worth it for me to be able to defend my honor that I'm not trying to lowball the county. So if we need to pay for an appraisal review, I will pay for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McKinley?
Yes.
I just want to say, appraisers fall under federal guidelines and they're not supposed to hit any type of number. It's supposed to be based on competency and fair, equitable process. So, there are regulations that appraisers must follow or else they could be disciplined as well. They fall under federal standards. So, it's not about going back and forth between appraisers and sorry, other people said lowballing it. Obviously something that we probably should have in the state. People in the real estate business, it's supposed to be fair, equitable, and they're supposed to be reasonable and competency in that profession. Else they could be taking the task and they have disciplinary board as well. Because some appraisers, they've been disciplined for quote unquote hitting the number, or hitting a target, and they're not supposed to do that. They're just like a judge. They're supposed to opine on value.
Mr. McGinley, if I could.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Again, this is more of the same problem that we're having. And this is something that the real estate committee needs to work on, and they have been working on it. But I think it's very disingenuous for us to ask somebody who's going to purchase a property to do all the work and then turn around and tell them that we don't agree with the price that you've come up with. I think it should be done a totally different way. I think that the The process should be the person who's buying the property shouldn't have to advertise it. We should have sealed bids. We're discussing a bid that the person gave to the county to purchase this property in an open session for all the world to hear. And at some point, if council decides that we don't want to sell it to Mr. DeAndrea for the price that he wants to pay, we now have all the ammunition we want and need to get more money for that property. And he's done all the work and has spent all the money. This is just not fair to somebody who wants to buy property in this county. I think it should be done by sealed bid. If he wants to buy a property, he should submit it in a sealed envelope for the county. And then we should advertise that property as a sealed bid. Anybody that wants it can bid on it. And then we do the appraisal in the meantime. We advertise everything. And then we open the bids and whoever has the lowest bid gets it at that point. This doesn't seem fair to me that we've had this gentleman go out and do an appraisal, advertise the property, go through all the work it's necessary to purchase this property. And now we're going to sit down and go, you know what? We don't like the price you got. So we're going to just come back and give you an ever price. And if you don't want it, that's fine. We'll sell it to somebody else. I just don't think this is fair. And I just think that that's something that at some point, it needs to be addressed because this happens all the time in real estate in this county. And it's happened before. And we should not put people in this position who are residents that want to buy property. I just think it's not fair. So I look forward to how we're going to deal with this, with this whole issue, because he's obviously came to the county in good faith. He's obviously given us a price that his appraiser said the property is worth. But now we don't want to either, if I understand correctly, we don't want to accept that price. We want to get more. And we didn't do any work to even substantiate the price that we're asking for. We didn't do appraisals. He's done all the work. So now we're using his ammunition against him. It doesn't seem fair.
Right, I believe you had a question. Sorry, Ms. House.
What was that?
I think Ms. House had a question.
Yeah, I did.
Oh, did you? Go ahead.
So, the appraisal, his offer is based on appraisal.
No.
His offers was
His
more
offer is
than
higher than
appraisal.
appraisal. I understand that, but it's, in that, at least in that range. And why are we looking at a counter offer when the appraisal came in? What, you mentioned a number of 45,000.
Well, again, doing
Where did that
research,
number come from?
the 45,000, well, with doing some research, land is worth a lot of money, even if it's undesirable. It could be worth $1,500 to $2,000 if it's undesirable. But again, reaching out to the assessment board, since they deal with this all the time, they did a lot more research on it and they came back with $950 an acre, which again, if we're going to do, we have to decide what we want to do. If we are going to review that appraisal or come up with an opinion from the county, again, there's no procedure for this, so we have to decide what step we want to take next. But that's how we came up with that counter offer. And that's $950 approximately per acre, which is still a very low number.
I think if the procedure that was followed, and seems to have been followed, if the procedure was to tell them, pick your own appraiser,
right?
I don't think we have an argument with the appraisal and he's offering.
Well, if okay, you were saying about who regulates this. So the state board, the state has a board that will review this. So, if you have a question about it, certainly you can have anybody, another appraiser review it, but if you feel that it's a bad appraisal, you could send it to the state and see what they say about it. So just because you had an appraisal doesn't mean that we have to accept that offer. Council doesn't have to sell that property to any property to anyone. That's up to council to decide. So just because you have the appraisal doesn't mean that we have to sell it to them for that amount. Again, we want to sell property. We just want to be able to get the highest dollar that we can. What will that be? We haven't decided yet.
Leanne, I remember we had that meeting and we said they should pay for the appraisal.
Yeah, and we went back and forth on that.
And we went back and forth on it.
Yeah, they still.
And we said he was paying for the appraisal. And he picked, we didn't have a list of appraisers. He picked a reputable appraiser from Lewis and Freeman. And she's very good. So I don't see how the tax assessment board comes in at the last minute and throws a wrench in it.
I'm not taking advice from any one particular person. I did do research on it. So with trying to come up with it, how else would you do that? Would anyone else try to reach out to someone that could give you advice on it? what do you do? Not, you don't want to do research?
Well, I don't think that's the case, but again, I think you need to finalize the procedure and then amend it. Like, I know you said you have a lot of things coming up, but I think you have. to
Well,
have
and
a
this
procedure.
is exactly one of those things, you know,
Right.
so what do we decide? If we decide, put it in the procedure and then have council vote on it. Who do we want to have that appraisal? Who do we want to pay for that appraisal? Who do we want to order that?
Well, we had talked about that you might have a list of appraisers and that might, you know,
I
but
believe
then-
that, I
but then
believe the
still
county
think-
does have a couple,
But I still think you're bound, like ethically, I think you're bound to take the appraisal. Like if you give someone a list of appraisers and say, here, pick from one of these, and their offer is in line or even more,
we didn't,
you know?
we didn't suggest.
I know you didn't, but that's exactly my point. He did what he was told to do. And, you know, the fact that somebody might disagree with it doesn't mean that it's not a valid appraisal. So,
Right.
I don't
Well,
think
again, we recommended, all we did was recommend to council. We don't have to counter offer. That's all up to
okay.
council. That was, you know, just our
I would just say I
recommendation.
don't think we should counteroffer
All right,
Well,
So if it comes up for a vote, that's my vote.
and that's fine. Council has the final vote.
I do think, as Ms. McDermott indicated, if you get 3 different appraisals, you'll get 3 different values. Now, will this expanse be large? I don't think so, probably, but it's potential that it could be. Somebody came in at 17,000, whatever this one is. Someone could come in at 23, someone might come in at 15, and you make a decision. Based on what Mr. DeAndrew said, you know, in the past, when we had this kind of situation, we had a review, right? Of the appraisal by, in this case, it was Alan Rosen, I think, as he mentioned his name. I don't know if he's still out there in the industry or not. But to me, I think to have a review, and if it confirms the appraisal, I don't think there's any more discussion. But that's my thought.
So council is, I think that's what we'll talk about at the voting session. Like, is that a vote to do that?
Well,
Or
I
is that
think
just
at this
something that we
point,
do?
you know, the committee is tasked with coming up with a lot of those procedures and things. And, you know, I think that's something that should be considered in your procedures. And, you know, maybe your committee could make that recommendation, if that's what the committee wishes. Or the committee can make the recommendation, say, you know, go with the appraisal or whatever. Whatever recommendation will be, we'll.
Do you want us to put that through another real estate committee meeting, or is that?
I think your committee has to come together on it, make some kind of decision, but I think then move it forward.
Mr. McGinley?
I think Mr. DeAndrew deserves some kind of answer after what, 15 or 18 months or whatever it is at this point.
Yep.
Mr. Griffin, was that you?
Yes, it was. Thank you. Did
ahead.
we have the assessor's office look at the properties that we just did with the pews? Did they weigh in on that value as well?
I did, yes, I did get their opinion on that. That's why with the procedure, again, trying to have someone, have it start somewhere. To me, I feel that it should start at the assessor's office because they can do all the research that they need to, the GIS department, the assessors. So that's where I have started with everything because you need a professional opinion.
But those properties were not assessed, right? I mean, the Pews property, he didn't have that assessed, or did he?
You mean appraised?
Yeah, I'm sorry, appraised.
No, we did not request for them to get an appraisal.
They were all small parcels, correct?
That was,
It
well,
wasn't a lump sum.
there were 27 parcels, and then we just agreed to, the auction is coming up next month.
Right.
There are the 6 parcels that are
Question.
competing bids.
But they
And
were
the
all
21 parcels-
But they were all contiguous properties, right? They were all connected.
No, they were not.
Oh, were they? Okay. I wasn't
No,
sure.
they-
I didn't look at that, but I just think that, you know, and I appreciate the hard work that the committee's doing, but I really think that we need to nail down that whole process because I really think it's upside down as far as the purchaser goes. And we really puts the council in a bad position and it puts the purchaser in a bad position.
Well, there have been people that are interested in these before we start to work on the procedure. So if we do that until the procedure is finalized, and no one, will do any more, make any headway with purchasing. So if that's what, that's what we do, then just halt all county-owned property sales until we finalize that procedure. Because we do have the questions that come up. And again, you don't know all the steps to the procedure unless you're dealing with the problems, which we're dealing with. Like, that's what's happening. I'm learning, okay, this needs to be in the procedure. It wasn't in there before, but it does need to be in there. So that's what I'm waiting for, is to kind of get over these hurdles to finish that procedure.
I do think in this particular case, we've waited long enough. I think, we've done that in the past where it was, you had to review. The review confirms it, or, it's close, and by, you have something to say, yeah, so.
Okay. We will discuss
That's
that.
my suggestion.
Mr. McGinley? I'm just saying, like, I think in Mr. DeAndrea's case, I think, at this point in a good faith effort, I think we should just dispense of, the property, put it to a vote, and then going forward, put a moratorium on the sale of the rest of the properties until you finalize the procedure. I mean, he did everything he was asked to do by the county. I mean, and really, it could potentially put us in a liability issue if we, having all these different procedures for different people, depending on who you are. So at this point, I think we should just move forward and potentially sell him the property and dispense of it, and then put a moratorium on the rest of the sales until we nail down a proper procedure.
Well, I don't think it would put us in a bad state. We've done that in the past as far as the review. So it's past precedent. So I think at this point, it's something we should follow. Okay, Mr. DeAndrea, I hope Ms. McDermott's able to get the real estate committee to come back with a recommendation. If that, we do have that recommendation, it'll be on next voting session. Okay?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate the fact that you waited around for almost 3.5 hours. That's
Thank you very
a
much.
lot of patience. Thank you.
Before Mr. DeAndrea goes, we're thanking law enforcement. Before Mr. DeAndrea comes from a long years of law enforcement and a stellar career with the state police. Then he became police chief down in Hazleton. And anybody knows the DeAndrea family down in Hazleton, they're one of the finest families that there is there. And anybody that ever worked under him, I mean, he goes by the book. He probably knows every word in the book. That's just the way he is. And just how he presented himself tonight, I mean, speaks volumes of his character.
Yeah, Mr. DeAndrea was a visitor here at council a few times when he was the police chief.
Oh.
So we did see him in his other capacity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for all your years of service. And
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Number 10, this is the ordinance that we talked about in regards to the eligible funds for the American Rescue Act that Mr. Haas had brought up probably a month or two ago. And he asked to have it back on the work session, so here it is. So Haas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, so much. Yeah, members, at the packets, the same exact ordinance that we brought forth 2 months ago. And really, if it were passed, people would have been receiving checks in a couple of weeks. And we obviously didn't move on that. So I'm just asking the colleagues to support this. I have an up-down vote on it in 2 weeks. You got the report from CCAP, which I'm looking here was dated on September the 10th. And then Ramilda sent a follow-up 4 days later, basically said the same thing. And there's no final rule. And that's unfortunately for me, not a surprise. I kind of expected that. And if you look at what the Treasury Department said, I'm just going to read a couple items because they sent through CCAP and then Ramilda, there's a 2-page document that you might have taken a look at. If not, go back and take a look at it. It's on her September 14th email or CCAP's. And just the main points, I'm going to read 5 of them to you and I'm going to deliver my pizza and I'll be done. The Treasury encourages recipients to use funds to meet the needs in their communities. They talked about this report gives a non-exclusive list of eligible uses. So obviously it doesn't come around and say you can offer homestead, but it says here just because it's not on the list of eligible uses does not exclude it. And it said it's also possible for recipients to use funds in a manner that is not on the list as long as it's consistent with the guidance in the interim final rule. And that's the reporting guidelines that you would have to follow regardless of what route you took. It says here, Treasury is committed to supporting recipients and helping ensure a strong and equitable recovery, supporting the immediate needs of households and businesses. Households, key word there. And then also another big point, that it asks for assistance to households facing negative economic impacts, including food, rent, mortgage, or utility assistance. So again, all the other items have been covered. We talked about this when we debated this a couple months ago. What's lacking is the regular property owner. And I think this is very equitable again. And we look at this, that if you are filling up at the pump every week and your gas was $50 back in January, now it's $75. So you're looking at, to fill up your tank, you're looking at $100 extra a month. Well, already we're past $600. So this relief to our people is meeting needs. It's offsetting the gross inflation that we're seeing already creep into our economy from bad government decisions. I think it's time to make a good government decision, give this back to the people who desperately need it. I ask for your support for this in a couple weeks. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Thank you. Kronos time clock system. Mr. Griffith, you asked for this item.
Yeah, I just wanted to briefly run something through council at this work session regarding the Kronos time system. And we all saw the email from acting manager Kokomo about the time clock system and you know what the problems are with the using your finger in the cradle to log in and I certainly appreciate the fact that Ms. Kokomo said that we have good managers and there's nothing to worry about. I get it. That wasn't the design and the reason why the commissioners put in the time clock system. The time clock system was put in there for managers who were, and of course, when I came in the county in 2010, we certainly had handwritten records that managers or timekeepers in individual offices were keeping track of time for employees. And we found many managers who were carrying over sick time for people who used their sick time. And then when they got their allotment, they would just backfill it. And all of those type of things that were done in the past by managers for the time clock system was put in place. And that's why Commissioner Petrilla and Urban and I can't think of the last gentleman's name that put the time clock system in at a cost of substantial amount of money. Coney, thank you. So the problem that I'm having is not so much, the problem that I'm having right now is the fact that we have no way to hold a manager, to check on a manager's ability to keep accurate time. Everybody in this county who works here has the ability when they leave to get paid for their sick or annual leave. And at any given time, they get a check as a buyout. I call it a golden parachute. Some have it, some don't. But the concern that I have is that if we have managers that are keeping track of people's time and you happen to not be docked for your sick time, then you're going to get paid for it when you leave. That I'm not saying happens, but it's certainly a possibility to happen. The reason that I'm concerned about it is I think that we have a check and balance on that in that we have a security badge that everybody's issued when they're employed here. So I think that the council needs to pass either in conjunction with the acting manager and work with HR, a policy that says anybody who comes into the building must badge in and badge out. What's happening is we have people that come into the county, they don't use their badge. So there's really no way to verify that they were actually here or not here. So if a manager decides to put somebody's time in and they weren't here, there's no way for us to prove that they were or they weren't. So we have a situation where we have a division head who has now been left the county that is going to get paid for his sick and annual leave. We have no way to prove whether he actually was here or not. We have a department head in the Bureau of Elections who's leaving, and we have no way to verify whether he was actually here any given day or not, other than what the manager wrote down. So I think that's a real problem for the county taxpayers, and I think it's something that needs to be addressed by council legislatively. So somewhere along the line, maybe we could sit down with the HR director and acting manager Kokomo and figure out some way that we can make this thing somewhat accountable without going out and dumping a bunch of money on, I mean, I have work day at work. I have to log in at work every day through a computer, every single day. Somewhere on the property, there's a computer. I must log in order to get paid. That's pretty straightforward. So I don't know how we fix it in the county, but I think it warrants discussion by council to figure out what we need to do legislatively to make sure that loophole is tied up. If we're not going to use Chronos, that's fine. If we're going to do something else, that's fine. But I think it needs to be accountable to the people who pay the bills, which is the taxpayer. And the way we're doing it now does not make it accountable to the people that pay the bills. So that's my concern on the Chronos time clock system. And I'm open to sit down or have a committee of council sit down to figure out some way that we could address that situation. I think it's important and I think it needs to be addressed.
Okay. Moving down to number 12, discussion regarding council information, Mr. Griffith.
Sure, and I'll be brief on this as well, Mr. McGinley. The only concern I have with this is the fact that, and I understand when people send emails to county government, they assume, and whether they assume correctly or not, that they send it to the chairman of council, whether it be you or anybody else who sits in that office. And that's a logical assumption. If somebody's sending an email to council, they would send it to the chair. Some people would not recognize the fact that they need to send it to LCCM, to all of council. My concern is, and if you're anything like me, Mr. McGinley, you must get a boatload of emails every single day. Things do slip through, as we noticed on that last transaction. So somewhere along the line, we have to put a mechanism in place that when somebody sends an email either to the chair or to the clerk, that it gets disseminated to council immediately by that person somehow, because we had the situation where the search committee sent an email out, and I understand that Sharon wasn't able to send the email out, but council did not get that email for 2 days after he sent it because it was sitting in someone's inbox. And that should not happen. Somewhere either on our webpage, we should put a bulletin out that says if you have email for council, send it to this address. I don't believe any email should go to one person in the county council. That's not the design of the charter, and it's certainly not anywhere written in our administrative code. So we need to address that somehow, whether it be change our bylaws or something. But I'm not really comfortable after 2 years of sitting on council getting emails at the last minute because somebody didn't send it to somebody. So if we can fix that somehow, I think the way we probably could do it is change our bylaws and put something on the webpage, but I'm certainly open to any kind of input from members of council on how we can fix that issue.
Okay. Committees of council, Mr. Vo, you know, is indisposed tonight. He did spend time with us earlier. He said he has a committee meeting scheduled. Mr. Perry?
Next meeting is October 14th. I've neglected to mention in the voting session, I would like to add to our application the Arts Advisory Board so I can get that moving. You know, and I know we're going to review the application at the next meeting, and if there's any changes, I'll make sure it comes to the next work session and then to the voting session. But just to get that moving along, since we approved it, I would like to put it on that first page as a actual board that someone could apply. Is that all right, Mr. Chair?
I think that's a reasonable request, because you may have people who would like to come on the 14th for an interview.
I'm hoping that.
They will staff that committee. Budget, finance, and audit, as you all will know, next meeting on October 12th will be the introduction of the draft budget. And then from that point on, weekly we'll be meeting on the budget and working on it. We'll have different department heads and division heads and whatever we need to come in and make their presentations in regards to that. So get ready to spend some nights in this room as we move forward. Mr. Haas, legislative.
Nothing to report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Ms. McDermott?
Just with one regard, we have no meeting set, but for the auction that we have started, well, approved for the Dallas Township parcels between the Hughes and the Daughters, that's going to take place on Thursday, October 14th, 10 a.m. in the courthouse for
10 o'clock in the Rotunda?
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Haupt?
Nothing on strategic initiatives or county code review. And the job description review committee, which I'll just skip down to, we talked about that before.
Yeah, and that will be complete now, so it will not appear again.
Right.
Okay. Ms. Radel?
There's no meeting scheduled at this time, but our attorneys will have an update for council this week.
Thank you. Ms. Saban?
Yes, I've spoken to Ms. Radel and Mr. Griffith and told them that we have a lot on our plate right now. I think that I felt that we could put this off for a while. It's not an emergency issue in any way, and get some of the other things done, and we'll call meeting. It should not take us a long time to do that.
Thank you. Mr. Haas, blighted properties?
Nothing there either, Mr. Chair.
Do we have the membership from the redevelopment and the planning people? Were you able to get that? The membership from the redevelopment and planning, were you able to get those members?
No, I was not.
Okay. Mr. Vo, again, like I said, is indisposed, and he said he has a meeting scheduled. Riverfront Parks Committee, Mr. Haas?
Yep, I still have yet to be contacted by that group.
Are they doing anything? I have no idea. I haven't seen much.
Haven't heard a
Okay.
thing. It'd be helpful because
Mr. McGinley?
I got a call a couple of weeks ago, and I meant to ask there. They were concerned that they have some issues. Is there a blighted property committee scheduled sometime soon? Because they're saying that
Mr. Haas?
there hasn't been one or something.
Did you hear
There
Mr.
hasn't been one. Yeah, there hasn't been one since the duration of COVID. We had one member step down. We've had another member lapse. It's been difficult to meet. And essentially we haven't had meetings for people to bring forth their issues in the flesh because of the restrictions. So it's not an excuse, but at the same time, I'm also going to be gone in a few months and nobody's willing to take this over. So that's kind of where it's going. So, I mean, it's there. If you're willing to put the work in, love to have you sign on. I could show you the ropes. Be happy to do that.
Mr. McGinley?
Yeah, Mr. Griffith?
Yes. A quick question for Ms. Radel. Did we get any invoices from the attorney regarding the special election decision committee?
I know one was sent out. I don't know if it was received yet, but they did let me know that one was sent. I don't have the exact amount. I'm not sure if it was received by council yet, no.
So when you receive that, are you sending that out to council, or is the committee going to meet to that bill, or how does that?
No, I'll let all of council know what the bill is.
But are you approving it and then sending it off to be paid? Is that how the committee is going to work? I think that's what discussion was.
Yes. Yeah, the clerk of council will receive it. It was mailed, I believe, to her attention, but then once we receive that, the committee will go from there.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Mr. McGinley, I have one quick thing on before we have public comment. I sent an email about the proclamations, and I understand that the proclamations can't be posted online unless we take some kind of action to do that. I think
That's not true. It is. They are posted with part of the agenda for each meeting.
Right, but I was thinking if we could put the agenda, the proclamations in a place like we do with resolutions and ordinances, because we have people that are looking for proclamations, and the only way they can find them is to say, well, what day did it actually happen? And then go out and pull up the minutes or the agendas and then maybe get it. It would be more convenient for people who are looking for proclamations to have a part on the website that says proclamations, and they've dumped in there by the year, just like ordinances and resolutions. It would be much more helpful for people to get those proclamations, and it'll be a good place for us to see who received proclamations at some point. So if that has to be a motion, I could bring that for the next meeting, for the next work session, if you wish me to do that.
The reason we put it the way it was your request, Mr. Griffith. You requested that we have the proclamation as part of the agendas, and that's why we did it in that manner.
Yes, I understand it's part of the agenda, so
Just
people
so
can see it.
we're very clear about that.
Right. No, I wanted it as part of the agenda so the
That's
people who
right.
are getting the agenda can see the proclamation. But I think we have some place to put as archives or history so people can go back and get them later on.
I think we'll have to have a discussion about that more in detail, but right now. as you
All right,
can
well,
see,
I'll make that a motion for the next work session. We could have that discussion.
Okay, that'd be fine. But right now, we have a lot of other items that we need to be addressing, I think, that are very prominent with the county, so.
Mr. McGinley.
Yes.
I want to bring up, and I don't know if I should just do it by motion the next meeting. CCAP is having a conference again in November, around November 22nd, I think. And I would very much like to attend. I believe Ms. Crocomo is attending in terms of her as a manager. But they are discussing special sessions on children and youth. I'm sure we're going to be a point of the presentation, Luzerne County. And also they are doing a question and answer period on the American Rescue Plan, among other things. So I would very much like to attend. I'm hoping that maybe somebody that doesn't have anything else to do, like work or anything, that they might be interested in attending with me.
Okay, I can do that. Okay, members of the public.
Mr. Chairman, this is Mark Rabo speaking.
Go ahead, Mr. Rabo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I'd like to answer the question that you posed or Mr. Haas posed as far as who's on the blighted committee, blighted property committee on the representation of the redevelopment authority. I thought I said this at the last meeting. Mr. Lindy is still our representative for the on behalf of the redevelopment authority to the blighted property review committee. So I just wanted to make that clear for your edification, and as well as far as with the the composition of the blighted committee, and as far as with the meetings are concerned, as I'm sure Mr. Haas can verify, as well as the acting county manager when she was the chief county solicitor, the municipalities are supposed to initiate their process by their submitting their paperwork to the blighted property committee. Once that occurs, then the process can begin. So it's not the blighted property review committee that initiates the process, it's the municipalities and their code enforcement officials that initiate the process. So I just wanted to make that that clear for everyone's edification, and as far as any members of the public that need to understand why the blighted property committee does not, if they're not meeting regularly, it's because if the municipalities don't have any paperwork to submit or anything to give to the committee for them to initiate the process, how can they do their work? So that's what I wanted to say. And also, Mr. Chairman, I hope during the budget meetings upcoming that we get to talk about how we get to fund our infrastructure and our county roads and bridges, because I posed a few ideas over the many years. Even as you remember, Mr. Chairman, before the $5 fee, I brought a few suggestions on how we can work with our municipalities where those roads and bridges are located in order to ensure that they get maintained. So I hope we have that discussion during the budget meetings. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Other members of the public? Other members of the public?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion adjourned by Ms. Saban. Second, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition, any abstentions? None heard, motion carries. Thank you. August 12th. October 12th.
See you in August.
Budget season.
Stay safe.
Recording stopped.
Thank you.